From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Are you frustrated with the high cost of a college education? Has the fear of student loan debt kept you from going back and finishing your degree? Consider pursuing your dreams at Pod Therapy University. A degree from PTU will cost you next to nothing, which is also the level of education you'll receive. Just remember, it's 2020, and as long as you have a degree, no one really cares where you got it.
This is true.
And now, broadcasting from the University, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Sanchman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
So
I have a degree and no one has ever asked me about it.
Asked you about what it is?
No one's ever asked me where I went.
No professional situation that I've ever been in
has ever mattered.
It has never mattered once.
Okay. No, I think that oftentimes that is the case. I think that there are a lot of fields where in an arbitrary way that doesn't make any sense, they will like if you're at a business, like some company, they'll be like, oh, well, you can't go beyond where you're currently at unless you return and get a degree or something like that. And that to me seems arbitrary. Like, what are you going to learn from these textbooks that this professional doesn't already know, like from hands-on experience? That's way more valuable. So I think that's often the case.
Now, I'd like doctors to do that.
Yeah.
I'd like surgeons.
Yeah. You learn by doing. You learn by doing.
No, I want them to go to college and and learn in a situation where it's just dedicated to learning.
Definitely there's situations where it's needed, but I agree. I think that the entire concept of like it must apply to all things is silly. Like I don't think that that's necessary.
Would you say, Jacob, that you use it? Was it valuable for you?
Oh,
did it make
the
you a
learning,
better professional?
The learning that I received there is valuable.
Yes.
Right.
But
nobody's
the piece
made
of
it
paper,
a requisite.
The piece of paper has never been
opened a door.
Valuable to me.
So
at all.
you could have theoretically dropped out with one semester left to go, and it wouldn't have impacted your life.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And I almost did.
Feel like that's not.
Not even one semester. Absolutely, that is true.
You never have to turn it over to HR. You never have to send.
I've literally never used my actual degree for anything.
Wow.
I could not tell you where it is.
Ah.
I know I have a degree somewhere in my house in a box.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that until we moved out of the last house. I didn't even know that I had
until he found it.
And I was like, oh shit, my degree.
Okay, but the experience of college, regardless of the document, you're saying, yes, the
that
information was useful.
Yeah.
And the professional networking and the opening of doors, like that kind of thing was fun.
I'm just talking about what I learned there. I'm not even talking about like, because that's kind of like step 2.
Right, the human side.
You're talking about, like, I'm talking about, just like, the work skills that I learned there, the
information was useful.
Yes,
that makes sense.
And also like how to work.
Yes.
Like
how,
because my degree is in, I have a twin degree in technical theater and then history.
Okay.
And but the history side is not important because that was something that I liked at the time and I needed a second part to my degree and that's what I picked.
That.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong, but that's not important to this conversation. The theater part, though, was it taught me how here's what you get in at this time, and you're going to work.
Yes,
you're gonna go in there, and you're gonna go to work for until whatever you need to get done is done.
Right.
And
that's the real thing of it.
I mean, the work ethic it taught me that. I certainly learned a lot.
I think a lot of people learn in college how to learn. Like, I think that's a big part of it too. Is like. In high school, I think you're very much like fed things in theory, even though high school has its own challenges. But in college, it's this independent concept. It's like, hey, go. You're not going to get a lot of worksheets or homework. It's like you have an essay, you have a test. Like prepare for those things.
You're also not going to get people that care if you do the work or not.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like if you go to the professor and you're like, hey, I really need help. Like I'm going to fail. Is there an extra credit? They'll be like, oh no, retake the course. Like I don't care. Why are you here?
Right.
Yeah, there is no empathy.
There's no hand-holding.
Which is better. That's probably a good idea.
Well, that's a good lesson. That's how life works.
And that's the central concept, listeners, of the Pod Therapy University, where we don't care what ultimately happens and what you do and whether you get anything. It's funny because there is a psychiatrist who does a podcast. I should probably plug it since I'm actually sitting here talking about it. I don't listen to it very much. Occasionally, there's something that's like, oh, okay, let's find out what this dude's talking about. It is called Psychiatry and Psychotherapy Podcast by David Puder, Puder, MD. and it's an interesting podcast because it's like super data driven, super intellectual, but he doesn't just say like, here's recent research. He also says things like, hey, if you're a student, let's talk about Therapeutic Alliance 101, or let's talk about, how to script SSRIs and for what purpose one would do that. And so it's interesting stuff. Like, I do think that it's pretty useful, but like, it's also like exactly what we created this podcast to not be, like it's bland, it's informational. We want it to be entertaining and zero information. And I feel like we've achieved that. Well, zero on both fronts, probably.
We've definitely achieved zero
half
information.
Yeah. We've gotten the second half.
We're still working
in
on
the
entertainment part.
But but in that anyway, my whole point of bringing that up was in his show he talks about how you can actually get CEUs in some states for listening to his show.
Really?
And then he has like follow-up like paperwork that you can do to answer questions and submit it to get CEUs.
Oh yeah, we're definitely not on the same plane.
No. We are nowhere near that. But Pod Therapy University, that's what we should do. We should create a fake certificate, and then if you listen to certain episodes and can answer random trivia questions, you know what? If you can just answer all the commercial questions, you get the degree.
I think honestly, our THERAPRODUCERs should just get one right away.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just make one.
Let's print those out.
Yeah. And just you for time served.
Yeah.
We're retroactively giving you this document.
Let us know if this works for anything in your life.
Yeah.
If this helps you in any
just
way.
Put it out there. Show it to a police officer next time you get pulled over.
We can make it an honorary doctorate.
Yes. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
You go.
Anytime somebody speaks on our show, we should give them an honorary doctorate for having given the speech.
I keep trying to get every chance that we Matt and Paul and I have that we deal with anybody from a university. I keep trying to get somebody to give us an honorary doctorate. Like I want an actual honorary doctorate.
Like if you're speaking at LSU or something. So I mean, how do we apply for that? Is that something? Do you send it to us? So we pick it up there. Yeah,
I really want somebody to give us an honorary doctorate.
Well, guess what, Jacob? Today's your day.
I want an actual university to give us an honorary doctorate.
Oh, okay. So, okay. I mean, what really is the difference between a university and us just claiming to be one?
I feel like now you're just splitting hairs.
Yeah.
I am.
This is logistics.
No, I don't.
We can take the time. Let's put in the paperwork. How hard is it to get credentials?
How
Trump
hard
University
is it to be a university?
How hard can it be?
Let me Google it.
Let me Google this. If you can get fake degrees, you can get fake university credentials and create a fake university.
Alexa, how can I be a university?
Done. You've just completed the application process. It's those who ask the question. All we have to do is get like a P.O. box in the Caribbean. And this is not hard. This is not, we'll get back to you, Jacob.
Great.
So what's the news, Nick? What's going on in the world of science?
I found an A block today. I think that would be good.
Okay.
Because it's interesting research, but then it also kind of touches on a controversy that I've seen kind of blowing up on the internet. It's not anything really new, I don't think. I think it's been going on for several years.
Okay.
But it seems like it's really catching steam.
Okay.
I'll touch base on that in a second.
Is it the blue dress thing?
No, I never understood that. Anyway.
These are controversies that the people want answers to.
Yeah. Oh, there was something else I was going to talk to you about, too, in the... Oh, the seat pushing thing, the viral video on the airplane. Have you seen that?
Oh, the dude who punches the seat?
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask you about that. Well, that'll be for another time.
In Spirit Airlines, the seats do not recline.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem.
It's a non-issue.
Yeah, we've avoided that whole problem right there.
Spirit has solved that
It's just
problem.
a plank of wood you're sitting on. It ain't going back. The nails prevent that.
There's no back of the seat.
There is no rotating mechanism.
So the research I came across today, researchers discover the brain circuit that is linked to food impulsivity.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the craving that you get, or that impulsivity that you have to eat a certain
when
type of food,
when you're not biologically hungry.
Right.
Okay.
They've actually discovered what that is.
Ah.
Okay. So this is really
that is interesting.
So
if you rub your head with magnets, maybe you can disentangle this thing.
No, they haven't figured out how to manipulate it.
Okay. We're just at the phase where we caught it. Okay.
Right. So the team of researchers, this comes from, this was published in Nature Communications. So these researchers from the University of Georgia have identified a special circuit in the brain that alters food impulsivity. And reading this, I'll tell you, for those of you who listened to the last episode, I'm still getting over my dental procedure.
Yes.
And I still have that stent at the top of my mouth.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of words here that are really hard for me to say.
He whipped it out in the parking lot, and it was very off-putting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very off-putting when he whipped it out in the parking lot.
So there's an underlying physiology in the brain that regulates your capacity to say no.
Uh-huh.
Right? So this is coming from Emily Noble, who's an assistant professor at University of Georgia.
Yeah, M Nobes.
Yeah, M. She just goes by M to her friends.
Yeah. So this experiment models how you can activate that circuitry to get a specific behavioral response. So what they found was that this has to do with the circuitry in the hippocampus that's known as the melanin concentrating hormone, or MCH.
Melanin's the thing that makes my skin tan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I
So tan people have eating disorders. No, that's what I just heard.
Thanks for playing along. But
Darwin
what they
was
actually
right.
did, this is really interesting. So they found this circuitry. They found a way to kind of stimulate that part of the brain.
Okay.
And they did this with rats. So what they did was they trained rats using
tanning beds.
For our psychology students out there, this is what's called as a fixed variable or fixed interval response. Oh my God, I'm losing the words. It's behavioral response, right? So a schedule of reinforcement. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Fixed interval schedule of reinforcement.
Yeah.
So basically what that means was when the rat pushes the bar, it gets a pellet of food.
Yeah.
But that response is only that bar push is only reinforced every 20 minutes.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter how many times they push it. It's only active every 20 minutes.
Okay.
So the rat learns to time it out, essentially.
Wow.
Right? But what happens?
So eat and then wait.
So push it, and then they learn, okay, I
out.
can't wait. I have to wait another 20 minutes here, and then they'll go back and they'll push it right around the 20-minute mark.
They look at their little rat Rolex,
right.
and they wait.
And then set
a timer.
They can train them to do that, right?
Okay, wow.
But what happens is when they stimulate this part of the brain, the rat just goes crazy. And just keeps hitting the bar.
I see.
And is not. Even though it's trained not to do that,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You're tweaking the thingy that says food now, food now, food
because
now.
It's that impulse response that gets triggered.
Okay.
So
that is interesting.
Yeah. So the results says that it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect how much the animal liked the food or how hard it was willing to work for the food.
No.
Rather, the circuit acted on the animal's inhibitory control and their ability to stop themselves from trying to get the food.
Wow. Interesting.
So, here are some of the takeaways. Going back to kind of the debate that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You've kind of heard of this body positivity movement.
I have heard of it.
Right. Okay. So this idea, the body positivity versus like this other group, which is kind of the group saying that this isn't a healthy thing to be promoted. Right. So the body positivity it kind of started as kind of a way to fight back against these like completely unrealistic body images that we've got.
Yeah, the Barbie doll and He-Man
Barbie doll.
Yeah.
Yes. Or
it was like
supermodels.
Love your body. It's not, you don't have to look like that. Okay.
Exactly. So it's kind of a response to that and saying like, look, we don't all fit that.
Right.
That's impossible for all of us to fit this model. Just
sure.
Be proud of what you look like.
There's different body types. Love your body. Yeah.
Exactly. Love yourself and all that. So it was born kind of out of that movement, and that's all good. Like everything that they're saying is positive around that.
Right.
Then there's the other half, which is kind of coming back and saying, okay, but this is unhealthy.
Right. We do have a science called nutrition, and we do know what the body needs.
In the same sense of if you continue smoking, then there's going to be health consequences.
If your cardiologist tells you need to drop 50 pounds and you say, don't judge my body, he's going to squint at you and be like, no, I'm like interested that your heart doesn't explode.
So there's been kind of this back and forth, and then Bill Maher got into kind of a little trouble with this a few months back because he had in his segment he was talking about.
I haven't had Bill Maher in a while. I got rid of HBO.
Well, this came. I actually didn't see this on HBO. This came up.
Heard about it?
Yeah, it came up actually on my Facebook feed.
Oh, okay.
So a comment that he made, he did this whole rant on like, this isn't complicated, people. We just need to lose weight. We need to be healthier.
Yeah.
Calories in minus calories out. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then James Corbin.
The talk show host.
Yeah, he came back with another message on his show back to Bill Maher. And
wow.
Hey, Bill, I respect you, but it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back and forth. So what's really interesting about this is I think both sides are right to a certain extent. Like when Bill Maher is saying stuff like calories in minus calories out, I've even said that.
Okay.
And
sure.
that
he's not wrong.
It is true.
Yeah.
Right? But what we're learning is that it's not quite that simple.
Right.
Because if what we find out, if this study, this study is really important because it touches on this,
right,
how the brain reacts
part
to
of this
food
debate.
Impulsivity.
Right.
And if we find, which I think we will find, variations within the circuitry of this MCH within individuals, then we can conclude that cravings are going to be different.
Right.
So the craving you may experience for pizza is going to be different than the craving I experience from pizza.
Interesting.
Not all cravings are going to be universal.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a really important piece of the puzzle to figure out.
That
and kind of
is.
plug in here.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not really going to be that simple. And I think what's going to happen is this just eat less and exercise more
right.
may be the 2020 equivalent of the 1980s version of just say no.
Ah, right. It's a overly simplistic answer to a very complicated
Exactly. You know,
discussion.
people would always say, okay, well, you've got an alcohol problem. Well, just stop drinking.
Stop drinking.
You know, you've got a drug problem. Well, just stop using drugs.
Yeah.
You have a food problem. Well, just eat less food.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think that's a good comparison.
Why not?
I think it is because when I hear, and I haven't heard Bill Maher say this, but when I hear someone like Bill Maher say this, because people say these things, it seems as though they are stating more of a theory than a practice. So when I hear someone say, "Oh, it's easy to lose weight. You eat less than you move around.
Right.
More calories out than calories in.
Right.
Bam, you're going to lose weight."
There's just math. Right.
That is a statement of theory.
Okay.
And the practice of it, of course, isn't going to be that simple because it's easier to say something than it is to do something.
Right.
Right.
And so I'm okay with people saying that.
Right.
I'm okay when people say, like, no, the weight loss part is simple because weight loss is simple.
Yeah. I see
The
your
actual physical weight loss is simple.
Yeah,
Yes.
the mechanism of losing weight. Yes, that is simple.
Yes,
that's a good point.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I don't think this actually takes away from that.
But
Because
whereas, like
ultimately-
with drug addiction and everything,
Right.
as we've talked about in the past, like there are physical barriers that, like once you are addicted to something, you're physically addicted to that, and then there are some physical barriers that you have to then overcome.
Right.
However, we could make the same argument though with the drug and alcohol use though. Because that's
Just
basically
stop
what
drinking.
this is finding is that this is a physical barrier.
And I'm okay with
This
that
is
too,
a
though.
different. Okay.
But I'm
I think
okay with
he took issue with the sloganing, like the just say no oversimplification thing.
Well, because I think the just say no on its level, yes. If we just stop using drugs, yes, of course that's going to work.
But we're needing to appreciate
However,
the complexity of it.
It isn't that simple. Like
Right.
for me to go to a bar and have 2 drinks and then stop and then not drink again for another couple months,
Is
I
different.
can do that.
You don't have an impulse.
There are
Whereas-
people who
okay.
physically can't because of brain chemistry and how the brain circuitry has
Right.
been wired in the rewards pathway.
So I have a question about this study. With
Does that
the
make
rats.
sense? I don't know if I was...
Yeah, I mean it's a complex issue.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I appreciate
the complexity
that.
of it.
Yeah.
I do think that's fair. But I also agree, like it is a really simple mechanism. So question about the rats, though.
Okay.
Are they, the circuitry thing, I'm probably taking a shot in the dark here, and they probably aren't going to say anything about it. But I'm wondering if it's neuroplasticity. Because in theory, we don't necessarily have a theory that says there are some brains which inherently have a predisposition of vulnerability to alcohol, and then other brains that inherently don't. We wonder if there's a genetic factor. There's some clues to indicate that, but we've never scanned an MRI and found a circuit, right? What we found, though, is like a linkage between trauma and alcohol and drug abuse, which obviously is not genetic. Like that's clearly something that's happened postnatally, which would imply neuroplasticity has shaped your brain to circuit around and want that dopamine exchange, right? So my question is, do we think that's what's happening here, or is it literally...
This study doesn't go into that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
I figured
this study
it might not,
just
yeah.
talks about the circuitry existing.
Okay.
So they haven't even touched on whether
Not
it's
the
going to be...
origin of the
Yeah,
circuitry.
exactly.
Yeah, like
Or-
why it does
Or
what it
even if it's going to be different within a
It's
population.
just, look
of
at this,
rats.
it's doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the other thing, though, too, is that you're right, but there's a piece that you're kind of missing. It's not like there's no evidence whatsoever
No.
or
There's-
anything.
there's
Because
clues.
as far as genetic
Yeah.
links, because we do know, this has been shown, that everybody has a different number of opioid receptors.
Right.
That has been shown.
And then we can calculate.
So if you have, and the people who have a higher level of opiate receptors.
Right.
I'm sorry. I was talking opiate, not dopamine. I correct myself. I think I said dopamine.
You said opiate both times.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
You said dopamine a minute ago.
I did say dopamine.
You said dopiate.
Dopiate. So these. No, that's
And
my
opamine.
That's my nickname for you.
Staring at you.
Jim is a
Fucking
dopiate. He is a dopiate.
But higher numbers of opiate receptors parallel or correlate with a higher
So there is a
rate
physical
of opiate addiction.
Definitely that is
So,
there too.
Right. So basically, your
impulsivity
argument
control.
is that neuroplasticity, or were they born that way?
That's probably born, right? Because
Yes.
receptors aren't grown.
Right.
So yeah. So in this case, that was only my question about it. Was like, do we know where the circuitry is being developed from? But
Do we know
more
that
like it's
receptors
there.
aren't grown?
Well, they
they actually do because pain
is-
receptors do.
I thought receptors could be grown.
they can.
It was for the longest time we thought when you reach your 20s, that's the brain that you always have. And what we have actually learned is that there are ways of actually stimulating new growth.
Right. Well, also, but okay, the hyperalgesia, the phenomenon where you take opiates to reduce your pain, and then you become tolerant to it, and then you're actually in more pain, not less, when you don't have your opiates.
It reverses the effect.
Yeah, and then you need more. Would that argument say you're developing new sensors for opiates, therefore you need more opiates to cover those sensors?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't know the answer to that either.
What that is either.
I don't know.
I don't know as if it has anything to do with the development of new opiate receptors.
When
or
we're
anything
talking
like
about
that.
opiate receptors, in my brain I can think of two examples of receptors in this likeness: cannabinoid receptors and opiate receptors, which are just in the body, like they're just there.
Right,
and opiates
we've
exploit
had them
it.
for millions of years.
Yeah, they're just already there.
Right.
I don't know if those can be created as more because we're talking about a physical thing, whereas like pain receptors, that does grow. Like you can create more pain response. So I don't know. These are good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great questions for listeners
Very
of
good
our show to
questions.
write back with.
Good questions for somebody to look up.
Somebody else should answer these. We're done with the A
We
block.
did our part.
Yeah, we
damn
did
it.
our part. We gave
got
you
you
information.
talking.
Yeah, that's right. We're here to ask the tough questions, not to answer.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that was kind of an interesting study.
that
I think
is.
It leads to a lot of questions and a lot more about how we deal with obesity in America and what are the things. What is our approach going to be? And ultimately, at the end of the day, we know that the shaming thing tends not to work. If anything, it drives people further into whatever behavior they were doing.
Right.
But I think, hopefully with this, we can find some kind of middle ground within this debate and realize that there's some rightness to both sides. I think we just need to figure out, as science develops, I think we're going to understand more about the brain.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when I think of weight loss, I think that we have all the science we need when it comes to how to make the body decrease in its mass and its weight. And I think there's lots of great science about the nuances of nutrition and right ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have tons of great data on that. I think the great barrier to weight loss is not one of lacking information about nutritional health. I think it's a psychological thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Fundamentally, I think that's
absolutely.
it. So this, I think, empowers those in the psychology community to assist those who need to lose weight. Like, I think that this goes, like, we think about programs like Weight Watchers, which is kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous for weight loss, even though Overeaters Anonymous is really that. But again, support group, which is not just there to provide accountability, but is there to dampen that impulsivity reaction by facilitating group conscious, like that you have other people to answer to, you have something else to think about.
Right. And the other thing too, I think would be a good thing to point out is that with this research, it's not stating that if you are overweight and if you if this is happening in your brain, if this impulsivity thing is kind of an issue, it doesn't mean that you're doomed to stay that way.
No.
It does mean that you may have to work a little bit harder than somebody else.
If we could get to a place where humans could take a test to reveal that they have an 80% more active impulsivity sensor than other people, a lot of them would go, oh, okay, like, I'm glad to know that. Now that I know that might
explains.
That influences how I'm going to diet, right? Like now I know this about myself. I don't feel like such a piece of crap.
Exactly.
Now I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It should be used as a tool to figure out how we're going to address it, and not as a reason to say, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Or a reason to say that this is a problem for you. It's just this is an understanding that we need to figure out and move forward and use as a tool.
Yeah. Like I am very impulsive. I truly am. Like I will get an idea, and not only am I impulsive, I am what's the word?
Reckless.
Obsessive. Yes, that's exactly it. Like something will occur to me that like, I need to do that.
And now you can't stop thinking about it.
And until I distract myself with something else.
That is in your brain.
And it has to be something else big.
Uh-huh.
Or I just have to like kill it and squash it.
I have to do that thing.
And let it go and let it bother me for a few days or a few weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And just continually squash it until it just kind of flows out of my head.
Yes.
Huh. Yeah. That's interesting.
But I'm aware of that.
Yeah. That sounds like it's a personality flow, but that's interesting. So like you'll just spontaneously be like, oh, I should change this thing in the house, or I should like replace that thing, or go buy this thing. I'm going to put in a kitchen island or something like that.
It'll be things like, I have to do that. Like one that I've been squashing for a while now is like, I need to buy a truck.
Then you start looking
and then I'm like, oh well, I'll spend a couple of grand, I'll buy a beater truck.
Yeah.
No big deal. I'll buy a work truck.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh no, but I think SJ needs to use this truck too. She needs to use this truck for band gigs. That means it can't be a beater truck. So maybe I'll spend 10 grand on this truck.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll spend 10 grand on the truck, and then she'll be able to use it, and she'll be able to safely use it and get to gigs and everything. Oh, but some of her gigs are out of town. She needs to be able to take a sound system and a lighting array with her when she goes, several hours away. So it needs to be a nice truck.
Yeah.
So maybe it needs to be a nice truck. Well, if I'm going to buy
with
a nice truck, but if I'm going to buy a nice truck, then I should probably get a nice truck. So now I'm like, I've gone from $2,000 that I'm going to spend to $80,000 that I'm going to spend, and I did that over the course of like half an hour.
And she does a lot of monster jams, so maybe it should be a monster truck,
right?
I'm kind of the same way.
But I grab that thing and I fixate on it.
Yeah,
I do that too.
Fixate is the word, not obsess.
Fixate.
Fixate is the word. Is a better word than obsess.
Funny. I do that too. Actually, I've done that with learning Spanish, where I'm like, I need to do this, and then I just spend. But it goes away with time. Like it will be a period of time. I don't have to distract myself with something else. It just kind of I hit something really hard, and then it kind of starts to fizzle away after a while. But like. So somebody turned me on to Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University.
Okay.
Thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So aside from the religious,
I was going to say it's pretty religious.
It is. Aside from that, I like it. Like a lot of it makes so much sense.
Good Midwestern values.
Somebody told me about this. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to look into this. So I did, and I bought the program.
Oh wow!
And it comes with like 12 or 16 video lessons.
Wow.
And they're each like 2 hours long.
And you're just drilling into this now.
Yeah. And they're supposed to be done like, okay, watch this video and then you do this step.
Yeah.
And this step could take you a week to several months. And then you watch this video and then you do these steps, right? I watched 16 videos in a period of like 2 days.
Jesus.
Like I just watched them.
You binged Dave Ramsey?
I did.
To be clear, you're the atheist in the room, right? Okay. I'm just making sure. I just want to make sure that we didn't change roles.
I have no idea who this is.
Yeah, he is an evangelical dude who's like how to be smart with your money.
Basically,
it's like pay off
it's
your
all
debts.
about it's all about how to pay off debt and then how to start to be responsible with your finances and then ultimately build wealth and retirement.
But your
and
point
so
is
forth.
you fixate on something and then you beat it to death.
Yes.
See, I do not have this personality quirk that either of you have. I am over something in seconds. I will forget.
Right.
I have to make. Yes, I am a goldfish. I have to make lists in my phone of things I have to remember to do, and then I forget to look at the list, and I just go about my life. I am always live.
Well, the bad thing is because I'm making an example of this truck.
Yeah,
and that is that's an easy kind of like it's kind of funny. It's easy and it's over there. I'll also do this with things that are more serious.
Right.
And then I will get into like a full-on funk.
Oh, yeah.
About whatever it is.
Yeah, because you're drilling all the way through that thought. Like, it doesn't just flippantly go away as fast as it popped in.
And I will get fully depressed about it.
Right.
And then have to check in with myself.
Right.
And remind myself I have nothing at all to be depressed about.
Right. This was a spontaneous
I will
thought.
get into these funks. And,
Yeah.
I will literally have thoughts like, I think I might need to go see a psychiatrist, or I might need to call my GP because I think I might need to get on something to level this out.
Okay.
Right.
I will have thoughts like that, and then I'll go like, no, I don't have. I'm not depressed about anything that is real.
Right.
Which, I mean, I'm not naysaying anybody else, but this is just me. I'm not depressed about anything that is actually affecting my life. I'm making things up, and then I'm getting depressed about them.
Yes.
And that's I don't need to be there. I don't need to. I don't have to do those things.
Right.
I'm just making up a chore for myself.
Right.
I'm fixating on that chore, and then I'm getting depressed that I'm not doing that chore.
Yes. Yeah. No,
I've seen a lot of people.
Very common.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who will do that. That will have almost kind of full-on panic attacks over events that haven't happened.
Well, think about it.
Not.
That's what cognitive
don't even have a
behavioral
need to
therapy
happen.
is.
Right.
Yes.
It doesn't have to happen.
CBT is fundamentally about guiding somebody in this kind of careful way to sort of identify that you are imposing a problem into your world that probably doesn't exist objectively. Like, that's not real. You suddenly think it's real.
Right.
Because you were on Instagram and you saw somebody else has a kitchen island and now you don't have one and now you don't feel like you're good enough. Or, like, you need to get tile floors. Well, why do I need... Well, these other guys have tile floors, and, like, we don't like that our dog peed on the carpet. Well, I need to get a carpet. Well, I can't afford a carpet. God, my life's a failure. And it's like, dude, 5 seconds ago, you were great. 5 seconds ago, you were going out to lunch with your buddy. Like, life was going to be fine. And, like, now you feel less than, and you're upset, and you feel like a failure. And it's like, that's all self-imposed.
It will get me into a spot where I'll be at work, and I'll be pissed off.
Right.
I'll be at work. I'll be upset. I'll be depressed. I'll be pissed off at work. And I'll blame it on work. I'll be like, oh, just fucking work, fucking show, fucking work. Man, I need to take like 4 months off, and just check out for 4 months, and just get away from this place for 4 months. And it takes me with a little self check-in, being like, there's nothing wrong with work.
Yeah, it's not work.
I like working here.
Yeah,
this is fine.
Yeah,
I'm here. Nothing has happened here.
Right.
There's not a single thing that I'm upset about here.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing, Jacob?
Yeah, I carried this in with me.
Yeah.
And I've got myself all twisted up over something else. Yeah. It's not even related.
That's some imaginary thing.
What you just did, though, Jacob, I just want all listeners to learn from this because it's actually super duper relevant. We all do this. You're yelling at your spouse, or yelling at your kids, or you're kicking your dog. And you're like, damn house, damn, wife, damn kids. And it's like, whoa. A lot of times the conversation we're going to start with is like, dude, does it have anything to do with that? Does it have anything to do with work? Like, no.
If I'm yelling at Jim's kids, it's Jim's kids' fault.
It's probably my kids. Probably. But a lot of times it has nothing to do with the thing we're expressing anger at or that we're currently stressed out about or frustrated by or irritated by. No. It's an underlying thing. And it's usually like an entire perspective all around us. And like punching a hole through that like delusion just immediately pops the bubble. And like then you're just out. And you're like, oh, I'm fine. That was all make-believe. It's amazing how fast that can change.
Yeah.
God, that's a good example. Good job, Jacob.
Interesting.
And it takes that self check-in.
It does. And that's ultimately all that it is.
That was something that I picked up from some therapist a long time ago.
Damn it, why couldn't it be us? Why couldn't you throw us a bone and say, being around you guys...
Our ego doesn't need that.
I need it.
It's something that I picked up from Nick.
He made me drink Malort.
It's something I picked up only from Nick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 100% of this idea came to me when I was listening to Nick talk. Where Jim's going, I mostly just blur all that shit out.
What?
Well, good share. Thank you for sharing, Jacob. That was very relevant, I think. Yeah.
All right. With life. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss mental health disorders leading to new disorders. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Smitty Scoop. This break's trivia question is in honor of Smitty Scoop. What Middle Eastern leader set up a webpage to hype his 60th birthday 3 months after condemning the net as satanic in 1997? God, that is specific.
Yeah.
Nobody knows this.
Oh, you can piece it together. There's clues in there.
Osama bin Laden?
No. Stop.
Why are you... I have to try to answer the question.
This is for the listeners.
Is it Obi-Wan? All right, if you'd like to join Smitty Scoop and make the show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question is about mental health disorders leading to new disorders.
Was it is it Saudi Arabia? Is it the prince? Aladdin.
I'm not going to answer it. This is for the listeners. We'll talk about it in Patreon.
Jasmine.
Don't ruin this for everybody.
Jasmine. Was it Jasmine? Was it Jafar?
God damn it. Now they know.
Can one mental health disorder lead to another disorder later? From Anonymous. Hello. I was wondering if once you have overcome anxiety with CBT, is there a chance that another mental challenge will arise down the road? Would I wake up randomly one day and have depression? Like one day I had a random panic attack? My anxiety is pretty much at an all-time low, besides the stress from school. Thanks, Anonymous.
Yeah, I don't think there's any evidence to support that one would lead to another.
No.
I mean, I don't think you're at
increased risk.
Increased risk.
No.
I mean, if is it possible that another mental health disorder could come up? Sure, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was
right.
that you had that increased risk because you already had anxiety.
I get this question a lot from people who ask, like, okay, so anxiety is very startling. Like, whenever you have your very first panic attack, it's baffling. Like when you first go through it, it's very hard to see how this happened and like what the chain reaction was, and you don't notice it, right? And then you feel like a victim of it because it just seems to organically pop out of you over and over again. And I think that really stuns people. And then once they go through CBT or once they do some course of treatment and they get better, there's this fear that one day they're going to get hit like a Mack truck, from like depression or schizophrenia or something like that. And one thing I usually tell that kind of fear, because again, this is a form of anxiety, right? They're expressing this health conscious fear that something else bad is going to happen to me. And I'll usually tell people in that situation that anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses, even though these are all inside of one book and inside of one pantheon of things that we as professionals are disciplined to treat, please don't misunderstand that they are all the same thing or that they are in any way related. I usually talk about it like a garden. Like you can't take a carrot and turn it into like a potato. Like that they are two different things. They may exist inside of the same ultimate place, but you need to never misunderstand that you can't, carrot your way into a potato. So like if you have healed anxiety, you're not going to magically be more vulnerable to having a potato or something like that. Like it just doesn't work like that.
Right. So now,
hey, hold on. Something very important is happening right now. Swipe up to answer. Hi, Maddie. I'm recording Pod Therapy.
Sorry, I thought you were my niece.
No, hey, this is Nick. And that's Jacob. We're in the churn. Yay. All right, I'm going to let you go. We're answering a question.
Bye, good luck. Love you.
She's a very enthusiastic supporter of our show.
Yep, very much. I love how she ended that with "I love you," and you're like, "Hang up."
Hang up. Yeah.
Jesus. So one thing we should go back to something.
Yes.
There are instances in which one diagnosis can lead to a second diagnosis.
Yeah.
However, that has more to do with the same condition getting worse.
Yes.
So, like, for example, something that could lead to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So you may have grief or something over an event, but after a period of time, after 6 months or something like that, and you start experiencing all these other symptoms, it can lead into that.
Yes.
Another example would be any kind of personality disorder isn't going to be diagnosed for an adolescent.
Right.
Right, so an adolescent may be diagnosed with one
oppositional defiant disorder,
right?
Yeah.
Or conduct disorder, and then that may then lead into something else once they turn 18. But it's more or less continuation of the current symptoms.
Right.
We don't want to diagnose a personality disorder too soon because a personality doesn't fully develop until you're
and I think
20s.
that our diagnostic manual does a pretty good job of giving us concepts in a continuum like that too.
Right.
Where like even you think of PTSD, there's an entire section which are traumatic disorders, right? And so there's like adjustment disorder and like stress disorder, and like so we have like these basic ideas, and then they can building block their way into PTSD, which is sort of like in an aftermath kind of way too.
Right.
So yeah, to answer the writer's question, it is possible to have more than one problem. That's very common. And I think that anxiety and depression very commonly go together. And that's not to say that one is the other. it's to say that when a human is going through so much anxiety, they can often feel very discouraged and feel hopeless about their future, and that sort of leaves them at an increased vulnerability to develop depression, right? Think about it like an emotional immune system. When you're suffering in one area, your emotional and psychic immune system is sort of like compromised, and so like it can make you sort of vulnerable to things that otherwise wouldn't have really bothered you.
Right.
And then you can become depressed, or become self-destructive, or develop a drinking problem or something like that because you're trying to cope. So these are not touching each other, but they live in the same sandbox and they exist in the same ecosystem, so the weather affects all of them, if that makes sense. Yeah. But no, you're not going to wake up one day at an increased risk for depression or some other, mental condition just because you have gone through anxiety.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, I suffered from anxiety as an adolescent, and then as an adult, now I have schizophrenia, right?
Exactly.
It wouldn't happen like that.
But I would argue that the thinking errors that ultimately can contribute to and fuel anxiety also are kissing cousins of thinking errors that can fuel depression or fuel other kinds of maladaptations, which is why cognitive behavioral therapy is this broad tool that we use, yes, for anxiety. It's the gold standard for anxiety. It's also the gold standard for depression. And it also impacts a variety of other areas because fundamentally, it's not that the human has mental illnesses all the time. It's that there are these root thinking errors that can cause delusions and cognitive distortions and ultimately induce suffering, right? Like anxiety, like depression, like anger, impulsive anger, like sabotaging relationships, like a lot of things can go wrong, which ultimately those are not all diseases, but the thinking errors are at the core. So if you've gone through anxiety, I would argue you have an increased vulnerability to other things that may build off of thinking errors. But if you're going back to your CBT discipline and you're revisiting your skills and you're using those skills and you're doing self-talk and you're, going through the things that ultimately CBT taught you for how to challenge your thinking, then you will be fine because you actually have an increased maintenance strategy that most other humans don't have, which actually I would argue makes you less vulnerable to those conditions.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
You're okay.
You're okay.
You're going to be all right.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to be okay. And you know what? It's funny because when you see like, hey, I suffered with anxiety, now I'm anxious about, going through other things. Like, okay, no, it's totally part of your MO. I totally get it. Run through your CBT training. Like, tell yourself the truth. You're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine.
You're going to be fine.
All right, well, we're going to take our next break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss birth order. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's other THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Jake Schneider. Since Jake is a runner, we have a running trivia question for this break. What are runners in the Marathon du Médoc traditionally served sips of at stops along the way? Oh, it's got to be wine.
Why let anybody else play?
If you'd like to join...
Jesus Christ.
It's gotta be wine. If you'd like to join Jake Schneider, make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
God.
You can't ask a trivia question and expect me not to take a shot
at it.
Yes, you can!
Yes, you can expect that. That is how every...
It is irresistible. It's irresistible. The call of the riddle. It needs me.
Alec, you can't ask a question and then expect me not to chime in when other people are answering.
That's how it's done. That's how questions work.
Oh, my God.
Well, this is a good question, speaking of things that need to be chimed in on. So this is about birth order. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a little educational piece. Hello, Pod Therapy. I was wondering if you could go over how birth order affects personality, if that has any effect on the oldest, middle, youngest child, etc. Good question. This is a really good question.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead. Take a crack at it.
It doesn't.
Okay, that was fun.
You're up.
Great. So there's let's start with the where this comes from thing. Let's take a quick little rendezvous back with the past. So Alfred Adler, great psychotherapist and theorist in psychology. I believe his theory was individual psychology. That's what he called his little bouquet of ideas. And Adler brought a lot of really interesting observations to the history of psychology, some of which was a reaction to Freud. And at the time, some of the great thinkers that we know of really are reactions to Freud. And so Adlerian psychology was also the one that brought up this concept of birth order. So birth order... and so Nick and I probably disagree on this. I'm not going to say that birth order is an exact science. I don't think that can be true. However, it does play with something.
You don't think people are born before other people?
No. No. because we all.
I think birth
are
order
in a
is absolutely
constant
an
state.
exact science.
I should probably go back. Birth order having
I'm
an
not
effect.
convinced. You can't convince me.
Sequences are a lie.
That some people are born at some time and other people are born at other
No,
times.
that driver's license ID is the way the man just keeps you down. Date of birth is a lie.
This is what NASA wants you to believe.
Yeah. Were you there? Do you remember? Exactly. I only trust what I see with my own eyes. I don't remember being born. I've always been here. Memories are an implant of the simulation. All right, so
And that's all the time we have for today.
great question, listener. Let's move on to apologies. So birth order and its effect on personality. Adler is observing something that actually, in my opinion, is an observable truth, that humans subjected to similar conditions and circumstances and situations may develop similar behavior patterns or personality types as a result of that. This is why we can talk about entire regions and groups of people as if there's some kind of theme personality type, because in some ways they have all engaged the same ecosystem and the same general culture, and that will imprint itself, and so therefore they will develop certain nuanced behavioral types that we consider like stereotypical personalities, okay? So, real quick run through, and then I'll let Nick come back on this. So when we're talking about Adler's concept of birth order characteristics, here's some examples. So from Adler's work, he would say an only child develops a certain kind of personality. And he would argue that, again, it's not because of just the fact of your birth. It's because of the situation you are likely presented with that we can kind of predict is going to be there and what that might cause in your personality. So for an only child, if you were the only child, Adler explains that your birth is sort of like a miracle. There is nothing else to compare it to. The parents do not have other kids to dampen their enthusiasm for children. There's only one of you, so they're always attentive to you. You have no rival. You get 100%, 200% of all the attention from your parents. And so they would argue that only children develop personalities, or this is Adler's view, that they become adult very fast, that they become very comfortable in the presence of other adults. They were very commonly around their parents' friends and things like that. They tend to use adult language at a younger age. They tend to have difficulty with things like sharing. Why? Because they never had to, right? And so, there's nothing profound about those observations or those predictions that any of us would go, oh, that's hocus pocus, that's horoscopy. No, it kind of follows, and most of us, in a natural way, use this. The oldest child. The oldest child, according to Adler, is sort of dethroned eventually by the next child, and the oldest child tends to have to learn how to share first because the youngest child is not expected to learn these things. The oldest child is the one who has to relent. Adler would argue that the oldest child has higher parental expectations, usually participating in the protection of the next children. They're given responsibilities that involve taking care of younger siblings. They tend to become caretaker children, in Adler's words. They can tend to become sometimes strict and authoritarian, very hyper-responsible, feeling that they need to be helpful, they need to be encouraging to others. They can also develop closer relationships with their fathers, according to Adler, because he would argue that mothering involves a lot more nuance with younger kids. Fathers can kind of bond more with the older child at that point because the father has more availability. I won't go through all of them, but just to finish it up, Adler would argue that the second child becomes a rival child. They tend to see this older child as having this pace card that they have to live up to. They tend to be really competitive. They might try to rebel and kind of make a name for themselves, again, because the older child might be a caretaker and a hyper-responsible child. The second child has a reputation, according to Adler, of trying to outdo others or trying to make a name for themselves or be different, and sometimes that can turn into rebellion. The middle child tends to, in Adler's words, be the peacemaker, the one that tries not to cause, rifts up or down. Just sometimes they call it the invisible child, the one who just kind of stays out of it, take it or leave it kind of attitude, is not a fighter. And then, of course, the youngest child is sort of the baby, right? And Adler would argue this has this inordinate amount of older people in their life that will take care of them, that spoil them, that give to them. They can become dependent. They can develop that baby syndrome where they don't learn their own responsibility skills or self-sufficiency skills. And they can also develop entitlement where they sort of just expect that others are going to do for them. And ultimately that influences their personality. So that's a quick run through of Adler's birth order concept. It's not this horoscopy hocus pocus stuff. To me, I feel that's pretty fair observational ideas. The hypothesis isn't weird. And I actually rely on that. I'd say that in my observations, I've noticed that too.
Okay.
To an extent. It's not hard. I'm not going to say they all categorically fit.
Right. This is one of those things that on the surface it makes sense.
Yeah.
If you just put those pieces together.
Okay.
However, there's been no real research that has been done that has supported it and found consistent outcomes.
Okay.
Okay, they have found some outcomes tied to certain personality traits, but there's a problem with how they do that. Like, so for example, they'll find that the oldest child is most responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, of course, because when they do the survey, the oldest child is older than the rest of them.
Okay.
So with age comes responsibility. Of course, they're more responsible because the oldest child is 28 and the younger child is 25.
I'll nudge
by the
you on
time
that.
by the time they get there, how can you prove? How can you prove that? How can you prove that they're more responsible? They're at different ages.
The researchers, I believe, would have somehow
Okay.
saw that problem and
Then-
gotten that. Because
then,
we do
then
have
next week-
Piaget's like responsibility index to tell us
Right.
like what the correct level of life development is. So they probably have a way to think that through. Like if your 5-year-old's not driving, they're not giving that kid -1 point on responsibility and self-sufficiency. So I'm going to challenge you on that. I don't think
Okay,
that's...
I'll challenge you back. Bring the research because I couldn't find any.
So, well, no, I'm not arguing that. Okay, so no, I'm not going to challenge you on the first premise, right? I'm just challenging the picking apart of studies that have existed that they failed to. And like again, I don't even know what study you're talking about. You could be talking about it in a general sense. I will agree with you. This is in the category of things that I look at as more observational psychology, which, again, I realize, but we have to admit that in our entire scientific discipline, there are aspects of it which we can drill into and get down to like yes and no, double-blind experiment-y data. And then there's aspects like personality theory or even like thinking errors that are observational in nature and they reveal down the road. And then like that's trusted as a therapist is going. So like who cares is, I think, a good question. Why does it matter? It doesn't. But I think a lot of humans would say, that's not crazy. Like, human who has gone through some kind of life-changing trauma, will they tend to behave in certain ways? Yes. And that's not rigorous science. Like, we can say that.
Yes,
that's true.
but you can't compare trauma to just being a child.
Right.
You know, and just being raised.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you
and the order in which you're
If
born.
they said that, so like here's where I would take issue with it. Like my oldest child, I have 2 kids, and I'm done. I got that vasectomy that we've now discussed thoroughly on the show. I think it's very important data. So I have 2 kids. My oldest kid, if Adler's birth order stuff was trying to say your oldest child is going to be outgoing and gregarious and good at math, and then I would be like, okay, that's too much. Like that's too specific. Children and human personality theory is way too complicated to just be reduced down to birth order. So in that sense, it is debunked. However, I would argue that he's bringing observations and saying birth order is one of the most influential things in a young life. It very much influences the cards you are dealt and predictable aspects of what your household's going to be like. Controlling for other variables, this is an important thing to observe about a human being, and you can make predictions. Like if you're interviewing a patient and they tell you, I'm the youngest of 9 kids. That's relevant data to you.
Sure.
You're going to put that away.
Because of the number of children.
Okay, but if they were the youngest of 3, you're just going to tuck that away.
Okay, is it being the youngest of 9 children, would you say that is different data than being, say, the 5th of 9 children?
Yes. So if you told me I have a sister, and I always interview
but
you're going to interview about family constellations.
Sure.
But so my question is like, because you if you are one of 9 children,
right,
your parents have a lot of obligations there,
right,
and so they may not always have as much time to spend on you.
Good point.
That I get.
Yeah.
Is there a difference or a notable difference between being like the 5th or 6th compared to being the 9th?
Well, let me play this out. Let me use Jacob as my tabula rasa because I think that this applies to any human would think this way. So, just a human being who interacts with other human beings. If I introduced myself,
I try not to,
as the youngest of 9 children, and I said, so using just that fact that I'm the youngest of 9 children, we grew up in Utah. In a normal suburban neighborhood, big old house, and there was 9 of us.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm the youngest of them. Just from that, knowing nothing else about me, deduce something. What would you guess? Now, these aren't hard. You're not going to place a bet on your house about this being true. But right away, your brain starts to inform the way you're going to interact with me with assumptions. What are some of those assumptions that just kind of make sense?
I mean, certainly there are assumptions. There are assumptions that you may be a little more self-reliant than some other people. Because, like I just said, your parents don't have as much time to be around you. That doesn't necessarily...
what would my
I'm trying to think
like?
through...
Let me ask you this. What if you had to guess, what's Jim's relationship like with his siblings?
I would think very different depending on the different siblings.
Probably. So
because you're going to have an age difference.
Yeah.
You're going to have at least a 9-year age difference between you and your oldest sibling.
So there's very likely that I might have a bond with one of my elder siblings that's similar to a parent, that I kind of look up to them and they protected me. And I might have an issue with some of my younger siblings who got away with bullying me because there was too many of us to really take care of and stop. So somebody might have picked on me too, right?
Possibly, but this doesn't say birth order to me. This says there are a lot of people in the house.
It's context. That's what birth order means to me. Birth order does not mean which ovum, combined with which sperm to create next child in personality land. To me, it's the context that impresses upon a human, which can downriver produce predictable results.
And I guess all I would say then is I think there's way too many variables in that environment to say
it's not sufficient.
That it's
I'm not going to say
to
it's
pin it on
right.
birth order rather than something else.
But I would argue the same thing is true of other things that would indicate personality type. Like if I asked you,
Agreed.
Who were you raised by? My grandparents. Okay, I'm going to deduce from that all sorts of aspects about who you are today. You probably have learned self-discipline. You've probably learned self-regulation. You probably don't need to be entertained the way other people did. Like you were raised by elder, humans. They had limitations on what they could do, run, jump, climb trees with you and stuff like that. The forms of entertainment that you were offered were probably different. You were probably asked at a younger age to, contain yourself and be able to interact with adults. See, all these things can ultimately teach me a lot about a human. And it's just basic deduction. So birth order to me has value. I don't see it as this
scale of
telltale.
1 to 10. How much value?
I use it all the time. I would not say it does not give.
No, I'm not asking how often you use it. Scale of 1 to 10, how much value does that information give you?
I'm not going to give it a number, but I'll answer your question another way.
Okay.
It has equal value to me if you were to tell me in what your birth order is and what your household was like. That is of equal value as to find out the first time that you started drinking. Those are both super relevant for teaching me the contours of your childhood brain and how you developed into an adult. Both are super relevant.
Yes. I guess I would definitely avoid making too many assumptions based off of that, though. I mean, for
I'm
example,
allowed to let it inform me.
But let's go back to the being raised by grandparents example.
Right.
Okay. Well, we don't know anything about that situation.
Right.
My mom was 13 when she had me. My grandmother was 13 when she had my mom. Therefore, that completely changes everything about the assumptions that you made.
I would like to know about it.
Being raised by grandparents.
So to me, though, that doesn't refute the point. Whenever you kind of right out of the gate said it's hocus pocus, it doesn't exist. Obviously, not obviously, but my reaction to that is no, interviewing about family history, family constellation, and systems theory has relevance. I see this as the embryo of systems theory because Adler came way before family systems theory, but he was the first one. Here comes Freud, and he just says we have these innate instinctive desires. They're hardwired. They come down to evolution. And that was a really interesting hypothesis that gave us a lot of important insight and gave us some conclusions. Then you have Adler come in, and he says, okay, maybe Freud's got some stuff, but I think that there's also some things that are very natal in the sense that you don't have direct control over them that also imprint upon you and also are going to give you things like personality types and certain wavelengths of thought. And I don't think he's wrong. I think that he's got some important observations, and he teaches us the beginnings of family origin theory, which we all agree with. But I see why you would object it out of hand, because if we were in a university and a student asked us, what do you think about Alfred Adler's birth order theory? They're not asking what this writer did. They're asking, yes or no, did he get it? And we would say no, but he's building up observations that 100 years later we've incorporated into more modern theories.
Right. So I guess to answer Jacob's question on a scale of 0 to 10. Now, I'm coming from a different discipline.
It's just as
I'm not a family therapist.
You care.
But I would probably score that as maybe a 2, maybe a 1 or a 2 out of 10
of relevant data.
Of relevant data.
But something.
Maybe.
I'm happy saying it's something.
Okay.
But
I
for
agree.
me,
I'm happy saying it's part of what shapes a person.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
But
I would
it's a
agree.
part.
It's a part.
It is one piece out of an entire thing of.
I agree.
Here's my childhood. This is how I grew up.
Yes, it is not.
It's a
sufficient.
sliver of the pie.
If,
Right.
if I
Okay.
was interviewing a
I
patient,
get behind that.
Yeah, if I interview a patient, the only fact I have about them is that they are the third born child in a household of 3. That is not sufficient to teach me anything, but it generates a hypothesis that now through the rest of our interviewing, I'm going to be learning more about you, and each new fact I get becomes a new filter that I understand you through until I have a theory of your mind.
Would you agree with this statement, Jim? If that is the only thing that I know about a person,
Right.
I know what their birth order is. I know what
Right.
number they are out of how many.
Right.
Then you still virtually know nothing about the person.
I'll reframe that. So if you said number out of number, that doesn't teach me a lot. But birth order to me is not just sequence, it's context. So like in Adler's theory, if there is like, okay, my sister
I'm
actually
asking
called
just about
in.
the number.
Okay.
Just about the number. That's
No,
nothing.
That's not data.
Great, okay,
Well,
great.
that's not relevant. But that's also not birth order theory. And so,
Okay.
like, I want to be careful not to conflate those two observations. So, like, my sister called into the show a second ago, or called into me, right? And I didn't even tell her I love her. Sorry, Maddie. Maddie is 8 years
Because you
younger
don't.
than me. Maddie is 8 years younger than me.
Is that why you don't love her?
That's the theory. So what Adler would say is, I don't love my sister. So, like, think about that.
No,
Just
we said that.
knowing that fact about me teaches you a little bit about Jim, right? Probably. You could infer some deductions, then you could test those out by talking to me and asking questions about what it was like, with a little sister who's 8 years younger than you. So that teaches you a little bit about us. But Adler would argue that I should be seen as an only child. He would argue that if you have in his words, it's a 7-year gap. He says if there is a 7-year gap between one child and another child, you would not realign them as older child, younger child. You'd see each of them as only child. Because when I graduated high school, my sister got 8 years of being the only child in a house. And I got 8 years of being the only child in a house before she existed. That was half of all the time that you're going to spend with your parents in a household. So Adler would argue that very much influenced the context you were raised in.
I think that's a weird assumption to make
It
on
does.
this Adler guy's part.
No, that's not an assumption. That's what he says. 7 years. It's 7 years, and then you restart the
No,
cycle.
but I mean he's making an assumption there.
Yeah.
That's a weird assumption.
I would say it's not
I
a
think to
clean
make.
fit for me. Like I have some
No.
qualities of the only child, and I do have some qualities of the older child. By Adler's hypothesis of how he would describe his guesses, some of that does match.
Yeah, because I'm 6 years older than my brother.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
Are you the oldest?
Yes.
See, I would have guessed he's the oldest.
Of course, after you have that information.
Well, no,
I would have guessed that too.
Before
I just said
Before
yes.
that, I would have guessed. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right. Again, I'm not trying to get to like seance, psychic crap. But I'm saying, again, if you're a good therapist and you work with thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of human contact, at some point, I hope that even on an intuitive level, you can make certain guesses about humans that you're meeting. Right? That's not weird. That's what we do for a living. In the same way a dermatologist can make guesses by seeing your skin on your hands. Yeah, I sure as hell hope so. Like, you did a lot of training in this, right?
Right.
So, like, interviewing Jacob, I would eventually just ask.
Just to keep being belligerent now.
Yes.
Why would you guess that I was the oldest child?
The qualities that you have of being self-reliant, not needing other people, you have a strong independent streak in you. And those tend to be older child characteristics. And just in the way I know that you manage Matt and Matting's Ice Cream Social, which I know almost jack shit about. But even the little details that I've caught over time. Jacob's the one that arranges everything. Jacob's the one that controls everything. He's the one that has all the data. The other two guys just kind of follow his lead. That's older child shit. That's the oldest child just taking younger siblings with them and getting them where they needed to go.
And I would... so, for me, I'm only talking about me.
Yeah.
See, I think that has nothing to do with being an older child.
Okay.
I think that is when I was 15 years old, I got my driver's license. I was gone all the time.
Yeah.
When I was 18 years old, I moved out of my parents' houses and never went back.
So you grew independence at a young age.
And I
because
was
of
just
that.
and I was just out.
Right.
And so
That's a good
I'm
point.
only being the asshole now.
No,
I'm
but
only being the argumentative asshole now.
This is data. That would teach me more, right?
Right.
So birth order is not a sufficient theory to just not have to do any more work.
Great.
That's not acceptable.
I'm happy with that
but
answer.
it definitely gives you inferments that you could then start piecing other things together.
Okay, all right, do me next.
Okay. Well, I already know. I already know you have an older sister. Do you have two siblings or one? You have one.
I don't know.
Okay. Judging just from personalities?
Just from that, he's the middle child.
No, I'm not going there. Let's not do this.
Just from
I know you have an older sister.
Just from that asshole answer, he's the
patrons
middle
the show.
child.
That's it. Just from that, she's a middle child. You're the middle stepchild and redheaded and all that shit.
I'm the youngest of two.
You're the youngest of two.
My sister is 3 years older.
Okay, and that's Carrie. Okay,
Yes.
so that's the older sibling.
But I do feel like I have a lot of the same traits that an older sibling would have.
Yeah.
I'm pretty independent. Out of all my family, I live 1,500 miles away from all of them.
Yeah.
They're all pretty close. I'm the one that's far away. I mean,
My brother
I'm
just bought a
very
house that is
independent.
literally a block away from my mom's house.
And it's funny because in my family constellation, it's like that too. Like I have an uncle that literally lives with his mom. He's the baby of 4 kids, and so there's no. But again, that goes back to your point. So I would look for
But
something.
my brother
that,
also moved to Cambodia for several years.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, obviously it's not prophecy like the youngest
Right.
child, but also Adler would argue that the youngest child in a group of more than 2 is going to have different characteristics than the youngest child in a duo. Right, the youngest child in a duo can have, and especially when one's the, and again, this is not to listeners reinforce unfair gender stereotypes or whatever, but this is just primitive psychology. Adler would argue, if one child is the female child and the next child's the boy child, you have a lane. You don't have a rival. You have a sibling who is different than you. And you don't have to do anything like her. You have your own identity. So then you get to actually develop into yourself in an authentic way that in no way has a rival. Like your sister's hockey team wasn't better than your hockey team. She wasn't the other child to hoist the hockey trophy. You're the only one. And so your family was able to give you an identity of being like, oh, and here's our little ragamuffin Nick. You know, he's out there being a boy and running, jumping, climbing trees. And here's his older sister Carrie. You know, she's a sweetheart and she's great and she does really good with Nick. She's a really good big sister. And so like it's fine because it doesn't reinforce any kind of like personality type to come out of you. You have your own lane. Mm-hmm. So I think Adler would argue the birth order thing probably wouldn't apply unless you have like more than 2. So you're not the youngest child in his sequence in that case.
Interesting.
But also those strong Midwestern values.
That's right.
Make you really bad at caucusing. And ours is about to be a cluster F too. Did you see that in the news?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to early vote.
I am too, actually.
Yeah, get that done.
Oh, I don't know what's going on.
Early voting, dude. Go do it. If you're a registered Democrat. I don't know what your politics are. But if you choose to vote in the Democratic primary, early voting has begun.
What's wrong with the caucus, though?
Oh, it's cluster F. Just caucuses are the devil. Have you ever caucused?
I have not. I was actually
Oh.
thinking about going and doing
Do it just to do that.
Yeah.
Just
I'm just
to
curious
do that.
about this process.
Don't go sober.
Yeah.
Like, it is not worth going sober.
That's fine.
2 sheets to the wind. Yeah.
I think it's like, isn't it like 10:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
And it's a
and
Saturday,
it starts at a
too,
very
right?
yes. It's a waste of a Saturday. You have to be in a high school and just sit there with these people. It's really rough. So caucusing has.
But wait,
by
so
the
there's
time you
nothing because you made it sound like something specific is going on with the Nevada caucus. Is there not?
The Nevada caucus is specifically in trouble because the Iowa caucus used an app that failed.
Right.
Nevada had also bought that app.
Okay.
So then we scrapped that app, and now we're using Google Sheets on iPads, which the volunteers are now reporting to the news they haven't been trained on.
Gotcha.
A lot of them are not
Okay.
very competent with technology, and so there's already all
That
this
was the thing I
question
found out with that Iowa caucus. This is now completely
We've
devolved.
left behind all the other things.
I had no idea that these things were run almost entirely by volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
Which made me go like,
No.
how the hell
Yes.
does this not happen every time?
Oh, it
Yes.
does, though.
How is this-
We forget.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No.
The Iowa caucus does not happen like that
does
every
not
time.
Not that
No.
bad, but in 2016,
No, but
the
I'm like,
results
how is
were
it-
not announced for 2 days, and then they changed them over and over, and the Democratic one happened like that too.
But I'm like, how is this not completely like
Yes.
stick a fucking piece of dynamite in the
It
middle of a pile of shit
does.
and light the fuse
It
every single
does.
time?
It does.
No,
we
it
all
doesn't.
have
It
amnesia.
doesn't.
It
Listen,
has-
I
no.
was there. I know these things happen. Donald Trump.
No, there are always problems. That's
Donald
fine.
Trump
I don't
sued
care about problems.
the Iowa caucuses last time, claiming that Ted Cruz did not really win, not just because he's Donald Trump, but because there were all these inaccuracies.
Fine.
And then in the Democratic caucus, Bernie Sanders won the 2016 Iowa
Okay,
Democratic
do you
primary.
have any examples?
It wasn't announced till
any
3 months later
examples that go back further than 4 years?
that an Iowa caucus has been a
Yes.
cluster F. that's most relevant to me. Is the last 4 years.
So
Right.
no.
Well, how many times they have to screw up before we scrap it? Two for
but
two is good.
No,
Get rid of
Here's
it.
my point. Is that
We should
you
all be
are
voting.
so hyper-focused on right now
The Nevada
that
caucus
if there's a
was a joke.
problem, you're like, screw this.
Burn it to the
forget
ground.
it, we're done.
Why are we doing this like cavemen? Like we have technology. Go
And
push
that's-
a button in a
And
booth.
that is a fine argument.
Yes.
Make that argument.
And
don't
that caucuses
say,
suck. They suck. Watch. Okay,
Ugh.
this thing is going to air on Thursday.
The idea of caucuses fascinate me.
They're horrible.
The sheer I've never experienced one. I think I was talking to Justin Robert Young just the other day because he's coming into town for the Nevada caucus.
Okay.
And because he does these politics podcasts and everything. Justin Robert Young from Night Attack.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so he and I were talking about this, and I was like, I think I might go to the caucus because I'm registered Democrat. I consider myself an independent, but I'm registered Democrat.
Okay.
Only because you
wanna
have to be
vote.
registered in a party in Nevada.
Yeah.
To
Do a
to be able to do the primaries at all.
Yeah.
So I registered Democrat for that. And so I think I'm going to go do the caucus
Do it.
just to see it.
Okay.
Yeah,
do it
it's
because
fun.
I want to
It's-
hear what his experience was like.
Because
Are you
the-
going to caucus or are you going to early vote?
I'm going to early vote.
Why don't you caucus?
Because I've
Why
already
don't
done
you?
it. I've already done it.
And what was your experience?
No, my issue with a caucus is it's
Jim
one,
is fully tumescent right now.
It's-
Everyone.
I know.
Just for anybody listening.
Jim is standing up and pulling the mic to his face.
You have to have an appointment. Essentially, it's like
horrible.
it's Saturday at 10:00. Whereas Monday, I'm off Monday. I can go and I can early vote. And if I'm 15 minutes late from when I planned, fine, no
is a
big deal. I
chaos.
can just go and do it. But I've caucused before. It's fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best way to do it. I
it is
agree.
not.
But I disagree with your just generic, bold ass
yeah. No, that's
assertion.
How
that it's
many
just always
elections
been this way?
have to be
It's
wrong
always-
before you get rid of that model? During a presidential election, both the Republican and Democratic
Fine, this is
primaries
not a
4 years ago
presidential.
were ruined.
This is not a presidential election.
It is.
It's
a presidential
not.
primary.
Nope.
What is
The
it?
DNC selection of their candidate has nothing to do with the Constitution or the country.
Right. It's an election to become the Democratic nominee for
It
president.
is a selection process
Yes.
that one independent organization has come up with.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. The stakes are quite high. Therefore, the primary
the DNC,
process should
the
not suck.
RNC are not part of the constitutional hierarchy of the
You
country.
are right. They are private
They are independent.
organizations.
They are independent private organizations.
It is not a presidential election. It is an audition to be the candidate for president. And the stakes are quite high. And the state, Iowa, screwed it up. And Nevada will too. Watch. When this thing airs on Thursday, I don't even know when our actual caucus, Saturday then. So this will come out 2 or 3 days before our official caucus. Everybody listen to the news. And then I want you to comment under this episode, just only posting links to news. That's what I want you to do. I want you to go back in our feed. I want you to find this episode. I want you to comment under it with links so that Nick can learn. So that
All
in
right.
4 years, when we go back, he'll be like, oh, that's why we don't do caucuses anymore.
Again, that's not my argument.
You're just pro-caucuses. That's
No,
what this is.
no, I'm anti-generalization.
That's not a generalization to
Yes,
point out
it
how
is.
bad these things are. They're bad.
No, that's not the issue.
They're states.
They're
They're
bad.
They've
Is a
always
general
been-
statement.
No,
They've
these ones are
always been
bad.
terrible.
These two are bad.
This is-
I
one
don't like
thing
them.
happened in my lifetime, therefore
Scrap 'em.
everything is terrible.
Scrap them.
All right.
Burn them to the
Anyway,
ground.
moving on to announcements.
The
Don't
Nevada
forget,
caucuses are coming up this Saturday.
don't forget to support David Villalon's NAMI fundraiser. Go to NAMI Walks, click on the donate button, and then go to the search tab and search for David Villalon. Help him reach his goal. I was just checking that earlier, so he's about a quarter of the way there.
Yes.
Oh, and then also, just another side note, we want to thank those of you who write in to the show and give us some feedback. We do enjoy hearing that ways that we can improve, so thank you for that.
Yes.
And we do take it to heart, so thank you for all of those who give us some feedback to push us to be better.
That's true.
We genuinely appreciate it.
We do. We genuinely appreciate it. We appreciate both positive and
negative.
and well, not
Constructive.
negative. Constructive. There it is.
Constructive.
Yeah, challenging.
Negative.
But also, speaking of things that
Oh.
we need to do better at, I have some
I
apologies.
forgot. Oh, and I forgot to put new Patrons on here. I'll look that up real quick.
Is that due? Not for this. We
No,
already
no,
did new Patreons.
New ones.
Oh,
since
the
last
ones who
week.
just came.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
While you're looking that up, I do have some apologies that I think are overdue. It's been a while since I've issued some apologies. I have a couple that I feel like need to be said. Dear Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, I'm sorry that I said a red nose might mean that you have an alcohol problem, and that Santa shouldn't have asked you to drive his sleigh and instead taken you to rehab.
It's February.
It's overdue. I said they're overdue. Dear Disney's 101 Dalmatians, I'm sorry I accused you of using blackface when the puppies covered themselves in soot and pretended to be Labradors. The real reason of the movie was that skin, or the real lesson of the movie was that skin doesn't matter unless somebody is trying to murder you and steal it. Dear Dolphins, I'm sorry that I blamed recent reports of 2 dolphins found stabbed and shot on intra-dolphin gang wars. However, Rob on Twitter was right. The only thing that can stop a bad dolphin with a gun is a good dolphin with a gun. Namaste.
Very good.
Please forgive me, dolphins. I should not jump to hurtful conclusions.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to figure out how to
open Patreon.
Yeah, and see.
Thank you to new I don't think there were any, man. You know, the fastest way, by the way, is just to go to our Twitter because
I know. Yeah,
it's just there. Like, we don't post a ton except for My Amazing Valentines, which I feel were very good. Oh, also, we want to thank Wrap Snacks. Wrap Snacks, the official barbecue cheddar chip of Pod Therapy. Thank you, Wrap Snacks. Try the new Cardi B flavor. Remember, Wrap Snacks, stay true to who you are. Have you guys seen these things yet?
I just saw your post.
Yeah, they're real. They're real at Walmart, and they caught me off guard in a very real way. We want to thank Ezekiel Lawrence, who became a THERAPOD for us this last week. Thanks, Zeke. Hopefully you go by Zeke. And we want to thank Scoop the Boop, who became a pterodactyl.
Those were both on the
6th.
last episode, but you'll get an extra one.
Then that was it. Was it. Yep.
No, they were both on the last episode.
Oh, okay.
But all right, and we especially want to thank God. This podcast is a shit show, isn't it?
We're doing great. This is our finest hour.
We especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight and mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERs. Thank you to Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint,
no
Kayla
longer
Lansbury,
chairman of the board.
Right, David Data Scoop Violon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex officio board members Elio Dare, Dan Martin, and Easy Whip.
Chairman of the board, Easy Whip, who is an ex officio board member. Because money talks. If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy, and thank you all for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided to somebody who needs it. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Alfred Adler's Ghost.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
What were we saying we were going to talk about on the Patreon? You said something, we'll put it off and talk about it later on the Patreon. What was it?
I don't remember.
Was it birth order? Was it? I don't know.
I did want to get your take on the airline seat punching thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. So what happened? The dude flipped out and punched?
No, but now there's a controversy on who's correct. Should you...